Cam Rubbercamp's Mortgage Minute. Hey, we're always hearing the headlines, and usually the headlines when it relates to economic matters are never positive. It seems like it's bad news always sells. But I thought I'd share with you some interesting information. Did you know that Canadians have never been richer than they are today? That's right. Household net worth has risen to an all-time high, and Canadians are twice as wealthy after inflation as they were 20 years ago. That's right. Those are actual facts. But those aren't the things we hear about. Typically what we hear about is Canadian debt is record high, household debt's climbing, Canadians go deeper in debt. Those are all the things that we're constantly hearing about. In fact, the ratio of household debt to disposable income did reach an all-time high and hit the second quarter of 165.6%. But if we report just that side of the story, we're not telling the whole story. So what else do we need to know? Well, we need to know where are the asset side of Canadians. Where are we at that when it comes to that? So what I mean by this is, let's suppose you bought a $600,000 house and you put $300,000 down. And if I were to ask you how much debt do you have, you'd go, wait, I got 300 grand. That's right, it's kind of obvious. But how much asset or equity do you have? Well, that's 300 grand. So if we're going to look at the full picture of debt, we need to look at the asset side as well. So how do we stack up on the asset side? Well, we know that in Canada, the liabilities of Canadians total about $1.75 trillion. Now, that's a pretty sizable number. Now, stack that up against the Canadian asset side, that comes in at roughly $9 million. Well, that means that Canadians' net worth is standing at somewhere around 7.263 trillion, or roughly $207,300 per capita. So, adjusted for inflation, that's a new record. A decade ago it was less than $150,000 per capita, adjusted for 2012 numbers, and a decade before that it stood at around, actually less than $100,000. So as you can see, that's a significant increase in net worth over that time period. Now they also look at the affordability index and to see where that is. And adjusting for, and what the affordability index does, it measures mortgage payments, principal, and interest combined against disposable income. Well, that number for the first quarter was around 26%. Now you might say, wow, that's pretty high. Well, it's actually lower than it's been at any time in the last 30 years. Half of what it was in the 90s and basically a third of what it was in the 80s. Well, that's not news you hear often, because guess what? We like to hear the bad economic news because it makes far more sense. We hear stories constantly about poverty is increasing, median incomes are decreasing, inequality is falling. But if you look at some of the actual stats, and they're available, it's actually quite to the contrary. Another number that's thrown about a lot is that Canadian youth, the unemployment rate, and it's at a crunch. It's catastrophic at 14%. But it's actually lower than it's been at most times. Basically, it's been lower than it's been at most times in the last 40 years. In the last 40 years, the rate's been higher. But when we contrast that to a 7% overall unemployment rate, yes, 14 seems high, but we got to look at the broader picture and say, what was it in relation to what it was before? So, another thing we hear a lot about, and I found that was interesting in this article, was about how we say that we have the highest tuition fees in student debt. We had a study on that and it shows that both are rising, and they have been for several years, and that Canada actually has the highest post-secondary tuition fees in the developing country. Now, we know a lot about that last year with Quebec and how the students were protesting over their increases. However, what might surprise you is the rates of enrollment have been climbing. That's right. From 2000 to 2010, the population aged 18 to 21 increased by 12%. However, enrollment in post-secondary education increased by 38%. A whopping number. So, I guess what am I trying to tell you from all this? Well, simply this. You're going to read headlines, you're going to read things that are going to be doom and gloom. All I say is, take a few extra minutes, turn off the TV, go to the Google, do whatever, find out the actual information. You'll find it's not so depressing. We hear a lot about how the market's cratering and this and that. I'll tell you, we're busy. We're seeing a lot of activity, a lot of mortgage activity, those sorts of things. And what we've got to look at always is the big picture, the total picture, and, well, it was in the complete picture. That's so important when you're looking at economic data. So I encourage you, take the time, check it out. And as the commercial says, and I can't remember which bank it is, but hey, I guess we're a lot richer than we think. Anyway, enjoy your day, and I will see you tomorrow for another Mortgage Minute.